I'm Dr. Tucker, and we're here to talk about egoism. Before you get into the chapter and into the concepts, I'd like to give a bit of an introduction. Egoism is the moral theory of self-interest. It's actually pretty straightforward, but there are some clarifications that I think will make it easier for you to understand and apply as you study the topic. We should begin by pointing out that egoism is not the same thing as selfishness. Very often, someone will say that person is just operating out of pure selfishness and only thinking about themselves, so they must be an egoist. But it's more complicated than that, and egoism is actually a better theory than that. If people were to follow their own long-term self-interest, and if they were to do this logically and carefully with forethought, would society be a better place? I think if everyone were to think logically about their long-term benefit, a number of ills in our society would pretty much disappear. Some suggestions I've heard from some students include things like smoking, like driving under the influence, like drug addictions, like petty thefts, often teenage pregnancy or child abuse, procrastination, cheating. We pretty much know a lot of things are going to have bad consequences. But we think only about the present, and we try not to think at all. You only live once, some people say, YOLO, right? I think that some things that we think are going to help us end up hurting us in the long run, and sometimes we end up thinking that it was probably pretty stupid. This often hurts our happiness by damaging our relationships, we lose opportunities, and we limit our future possibilities. What about working together? Even in cooperation and teamwork, we would do better if we were rationally to think about our long-term consequences. Have you ever had a team project that went bad? It could be at work or at school or somewhere else. Has there ever been anyone that you would refuse to work with based on previous experience? I once heard a student express that they would sooner drop a course than work with another student that they had had an impossible experience with in a previous time. Is it really in the best interests of a person to slack off, to not carry their portion of the load? No, not really in the long run. In commerce and business, is it really in the best interests of a business or a merchant to overcharge or underdeliver or push shoddy projects or products? Can you think of a mechanic or a salesman or some other professional that made money off of you or gave you impossible service and you would never give them your business again? Have you told anyone else about your bad experience? You see, is it really good for a company or for a person involved? Generally speaking, companies that offer consistent good products and services are the ones that succeed. And these succeed more than those that are trying to get a quick buck. The conscientious employee also usually gets the promotions. Now, in egoism altruism, the idea that there are selfless acts is rejected. They argue that there's no such thing as a selfless act, and if there were, there would be no reason to admire it. Even humanitarianism and benevolence, though, can fall under egoism, and it often does. Why would it be in someone's long-term best self-interest to give away time or money? There are a lot of reasons. For some people, it's a matter of leaving a legacy. Their reputation gives them more satisfaction than their money. For others, it's the joy of solving the world's problems and being involved in making a difference. One of today's most prominent humanitarians was asked what arguments he could use to convince others to become engaged in humanitarianism. Among other arguments, he stated, "Well, it's the most fulfilling thing we have ever done." Some of these things look better on paper and in theory, but they're actually harder to carry out in real life. We will talk about that when we deal with assumptions and criticisms, but for now it's worth mentioning that for egoists and utilitarians, only the consequences matter. Good intentions aren't really that important. Martyred but failed heroes are still failures. One particular difficulty for those who don't agree with consequentialists is the idea that nothing is wrong in and of itself. Is it wrong to lie, to cheat, to hurt others? The unsophisticated answer is it all depends on the consequences. Now, a careful egoist will offer arguments that certain things can never lead to good consequences. For some, this is still an unnerving concern. Can bad consequences always be demonstrated before the fact? Finally, the best consequentialists, egoists or utilitarians, will be driven by research, by data, and by good strategy. In order to find the best long-term outcome, a good egoist will try hard to predict the best consequences by every rational and scientific method available. We will discuss this topic farther in the next video as we look into particular egoists and how they developed their lives around this theory. But for now, I hope you enjoy the reading that you will be engaging in studying these leaders. Thank you.